Good morning, everyone. My name is Tracy Weldon. I'm the Interim Dean of the Graduate School and Vice Provost for Graduate Education, and I'm pleased to welcome you this morning to the Campus Helpers Panel, formerly known as the First Responders Panel, hosted by the Graduate School. I'd like to start with a couple of housekeeping matters, perhaps starting with the reason for the title change. We received some questions about our choice of the term first responders and the reason that the campus police, nurses and doctors were not included in our lineup for today. There are some reasons why we chose that title that I won't go into, but we've decided to change it because I certainly would not want to suggest that we are slighting the significance of those offices on our campus. And the important role that they play in keeping us all safe. So let me just begin by saying that if you are ever experiencing an emergency on campus, the first thing you should do is dial 911. What I want to do today, however, is introduce you to some of the other offices on campus who are often on the front lines in cases of emergency, here to help you with various types of issues that you might have, and perhaps demystify some of the different functions of these offices. And so I'll let you know in just a second who will be presenting today, but let me also mention that if you have any questions, you can put those in the Q&A box at any time throughout the next 2 hours. We have 3 opportunities, as you can see on the agenda slide, for you to have those questions addressed by the members of our panel. But you can go ahead and start typing them in at any time, and we will answer as many of them as we can today. I also wanted to mention that this session is being recorded. So please be mindful of that as you ask your questions. If it's something that is personal in nature, it's probably not the best forum for asking the question, but there may be opportunities for you to follow up with those kinds of questions later on. We will post this recording on our webpage along with some contact information, web pages and the like, so that you know how to access these resources after today's presentation. Okay, so without further ado, I'll just mention our panelists for today. We will be starting with Dean Mark Shook, who is Dean of Students and Interim University Title IX Coordinator, who will talk about the Title IX office and procedures. Melanie Goff is an investigator for the Office of Equal Opportunity Programs. She will be presenting in place of Carl Wells, who was not able to join us today. And then we will pause for some questions for those 2 presenters. The second part will feature Dr. Shannon Nix, Associate Director of the SAVIP office in the University Health Services, and Dr. Rebecca Caldwell, Associate Vice President of Administration and Wellbeing, who is replacing E.C. Porter, who was not able to join us today. Then you'll have an opportunity to ask them questions. And then finally, we will hear from Julian Williams, our Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Dr. Toby Jenkins, who is the Interim Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Graduate School, and also a member of the Council of Academic Diversity Officers. And finally, we'll hear from Dale Moore, who is our Assistant Dean and Ombuds in the Graduate School. And again, there will be an opportunity to ask and have your questions answered. So with that, I will turn it over to Dean Shook to talk about Title IX. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning and speak to our graduate student population. Part 1 is really going to center around information about resources and reporting civil rights violations. So I specifically will talk about Title IX. Melanie will have the opportunity to talk about Title VI and Title VII when she is able to speak with you as well. So I've got 10 minutes, so very quickly I'm going to give you just an overview of Title IX and then talk about reporting and investigation and adjudication and then share some resources. So if you'll move on. So what is Title IX? Next slide. Title IX is a civil rights federal statute. It comes from the same line as the Civil Rights Act, which was the law codifying America's desire to do better. Specifically, Title IX is a gender-based discrimination lawsuit. Next slide. Law. So it's broken up in two different parts. So one of you may be very familiar with the fact that Title IX is the law that demands equity for both males and females. So part of that is equity in the way that we distribute funds for college athletics, because Title IX is focused on institutions of higher education. But more so today, when we talk about Title IX, we're also talking about its tie to harassment. In 2011, through a Dear Colleague letter, the federal government made it clear that Title IX prohibits discrimination. A form of discrimination is harassment, and the most egregious form of gender-based harassment is interpersonal violence, which includes sexual assault and some other prohibited behaviors. Next slide. So within the university policy, when we talk about interpersonal violence, the prohibited behaviors under Title IX and also via our university policies include sexual harassment, which you can read that definition, sexual assault, next slide, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking. Now, I'm not being trivial when I go through these slides in the manner that I do, because it's important for you to know as a graduate student, you do not have to be the expert in defining these prohibited behaviors, because your obligation is to know what resources are out there if you experience anything that feels like any of these prohibited behaviors, and also reporting. Next slide. So how do you report? How do you talk to someone regarding these prohibited behaviors? There's 4 types of reports. One, we've created a very intentional web report, which I'm going to cover. You can also report to university responsible employees, which graduate students that are teaching, I'm going to talk to you about that very directly. You can report to law enforcement, or you can also speak to a confidential resource. So next slide. In terms of the university's web-based resources, so this website is very important to you, sc.edu/interpersonal violence. This is the website that we've created that has all the resources around this topic for you. It answers a lot of questions. You can see from the screenshot from the website's main page, there's a lovely video that was posted recently that talks about our SAVIP office, Sexual Assault, Violence Intervention and Prevention. And great for y'all, you'll be joined by Shannon Nix, who oversees that office, later in this presentation. But if you're talking about web reporting, not only are the resources there, but you can see there's a box to the right of that website on how to make a report. Next slide. You're also welcome to report to a responsible employee. And if you will click next to have the language appear on that slide. So you can report that in person to EOP, you can report that to me via phone, email, or in person. But responsible employees are anybody that can be perceived to have the authority to act, and that includes professors. Next slide. Now, I wrote this tongue-in-cheek. Did you say instructors or professors? Because many of you within the graduate school are serving as graduate assistants, are teaching assistants. So if you put yourself in the mind of your students, it's very likely that you can be perceived as someone with perceived authority to act. So in that, I would tell you that you are a responsible employee of reporting Title IX violations as they relate to students in your class, in your classroom setting. That does not mean because you're a TA, if your best friend confides in you about something that occurred a long time ago, that doesn't give you the obligation to tell the university. It involves the students that you have direct teaching responsibility for. And in that capacity, you could be considered a responsible employee. And if you have any questions, please bring that up in the Q&A. Next slide. Another means of reporting is also law enforcement reporting, and you can click again to have the language appear. So that is the USC Police Department. Click again. Important to know, if the incident occurs off campus, our USCPD can assist you in getting to the right department to report. Next slide. Finally, the last two slides that I have in terms of reporting involve our confidential resources. Our primary one is SAVIP. Our goal in terms of responding to instances is connecting individuals with the people that are best trained to respond. And at USC, that's SAVIP, and you'll get to hear from Shannon a little later. But we also have counseling and psychiatry and university health services. These confidential resources, we talked about responsible employees that have to tell the university about a report. These are the places that don't, and they're exempt by law. These are areas where you or someone that you know who's been impacted by interpersonal violence can find support, can find advocacy, and find assistance. And there's also confidential resources off campus. Next slide. And these, you can click to have the language appear. This obviously involves the hospitals, the pathways to healing, and Shannon's going to talk about those. So real quick before I get off, next slide, I want to talk a little bit about what happens when a report is filed. I'd be remiss not to cover that. The most important thing for you to know is the university's primary concern is assisting and connecting individuals with resources to assist them. That is our primary motive and what drives us. So after a report is filed, we'll contact the reporter, we'll talk about what are the resources that are available, what are the supportive measures that we can offer. If there are safety considerations, we'll address those. But when that call comes, the first line is not, you have to file a formal report and we're going to do an investigation. It is, what can we do to help? How can we assist you? The university has a lot of resources available, and we will talk about resolution options, whether that be law enforcement interaction or whether that be internal investigation. And in terms of the institution's internal options, next slide, those are twofold. That involves informal resolution, which is mediation, only appropriate in instances where both of the parties believe that they agree on what's going to occur. And we do have a formal resolution. We have investigators. Melanie, who you're about to hear from, is one of those investigators that does an investigation. We have a live hearing in accordance with federal law. We use an outside law firm as the decision maker in those live hearings. So that's a little bit about what happens after it. So that is all that I have, and I'm happy now to turn it over to Melanie, who will shift gears a little bit from Title IX over to other areas of civil rights violations, including Title VI and Title VII, but I will be here for the Q&A session. So Melanie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. And now we're hear from Melanie Goff, an investigator for the Office of Equal Opportunity Programs.
Hi, good morning, everyone. As Tracy and Mark said, I am Melanie Goff, and I'm an investigator with the Office of Equal Opportunity Programs, also known as EOP. And also, as Tracy mentioned earlier, our interim director is Dr. Carl Wells. And the EOP office investigates complaints of unlawful discrimination and harassment, and that does include Title IX complaints. And as Mark mentioned, he is interim Title IX coordinator, and our office works very closely with Mark regarding Title IX cases. And as some of you may know, EOP is going through a bit of a restructure, and we will actually be transitioning to the Office of Civil Rights soon. But our main office functions will remain the same. So we will still house and investigate complaints of discrimination and harassment. The main changes will be that the EOP will be renamed the Office of Civil Rights, and the office will also be expanding. And the goal of that restructure is that it'll make the process better and more efficient for all parties involved in this process. Also, I want to start by giving kind of a brief overview of our policies. The EOP office has several university policies that are in accordance with state and federal laws, statutes, and regulations, such as Title VI, Title VII, and Title IX, which of course Mark mentioned. Title VI prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, and programs and activities receiving federal funds or financial assistance. And Title VII prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. And as Mark stated, Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance, but it does also prohibit sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, intimate partner violence, and stalking. We also have university policies that relate to these regulations that ensure that the university is compliant with these types of regulations and to prohibit discrimination and harassment from occurring. And all of our policies are listed on our website, but I just want to kind of give a brief overview of those policies. So our university policies are EOP 1.00, and that's the university's equal opportunity and affirmative action policy. And that's essentially a pledge that the university is making an effort to identify and eliminate barriers to equal employment opportunity. EOP 1.01 is the university's equal opportunity complaint processing procedures policy, which is an overview of the formal complaint process. When EOP receives a complaint, we determine if the alleged behavior rises to the level of an EOP violation. If we determine that it does, we can pursue the formal complaint process. The formal complaint process means the EOP will be investigating the allegations and making a determination based on the evidence presented during the investigation to determine whether or not a policy violation occurred. We only pursue an investigation if the complainant, which is an individual alleging that the discrimination and/or harassment occurred, wants to pursue that process. Our next policy is EOP 1.02, and that's the university's sexual harassment policy, and that prohibits sexual harassment. However, in most sexual harassment cases, especially in cases where the involved parties are students, EOP 1.06 will be used instead. And EOP 1.06 is the university's interim sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, and interpersonal violence policy, and that relates to Title IX, which again, that's kind of what Mark mentioned in his presentation. So this is the only policy that results in a hearing where a decision maker makes a determination. For all other EOP policies, a determination will be made in our office. Our next policy is EOP 1.03, and that's the university's prohibition of unlawful discrimination and harassment policy, and that applies to faculty and staff. Unlawful discrimination is unfair or unequal treatment of an individual or group of individuals based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender, gender identity, transgender status, age, disability, sexual orientation, genetics, protected veteran status, pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions, or any other category protected by law which interferes with or limits the ability of an individual or group of individuals to participate in or benefit from the services, activities, or privileges provided by the university. Unlawful harassment is a specific type of unlawful discrimination. It includes conduct which can be oral, written, graphic, or physical that is directed against any individual or group of individuals based on one or more of the characteristics set forth above, and that it can be sufficiently severe, pervasive, or persistent enough to interfere with or limit the ability of an individual or group to participate in or benefit from programs, services, and activities provided by the university. Our next policy that we have is actually staff. That's STAF 6.24, and that's the university's student non-discrimination and non-harassment policy. And this policy applies to the conduct of students in all aspects of academic, residential, athletic, and social activities, operations, and programs at the university. And it's the equivalent of EOP 1.03, which is primarily used for faculty and staff. So this is the one that applies more to students. And then there's staff, again, STAF 6.00, and that's the university's disability discrimination policy, and that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities. And that policy was created in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is also known as the ADA, and that states that an individual with a disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a record of such an impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. And additionally, any student, faculty, or staff member may request a reasonable accommodation if they have a disability as defined in STAF 6.00. And I also want to go over mandatory reporting. And I know that this is something that Mark also touched on as well in his presentation, especially as it relates to Title IX. But again, faculty and staff are mandatory reporters. And that means that if you are a faculty or staff member, that if a student, faculty, or staff member discloses to you that they've experienced discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, intimate partner violence, or stalking, or you witness this behavior on campus, and you are not a confidential resource, that you do have to file an incident report. And you can file an incident report by visiting our website. You can just find it by going to sc.edu and just searching EOP. And if you aren't sure if the alleged behavior constitutes unlawful discrimination or harassment that needs to be reported, you can still file an incident report and our office will assess it, or you can always call our office and speak with someone. And once a report is received, the reporter, you as a reporter, if you are the reporter, the one making the report, will likely also be contacted about the report. So prior to making a report, you should disclose to the complainant that you are a mandatory reporter, and that if they disclose that they have experienced discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, intimate partner violence, or stalking, that you must report that information to our office. And EOP, as Mark also kind of said, will never force the complainant to pursue the formal complaint process if they do not wish to, but we do need to document any conduct that could be a threat to the safety and well-being of members of our campus. And that is the end of my presentation, so I will throw it back to Tracy.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And we have about 15 minutes now for questions. There's one that's been loaded, and I'll go ahead and share that, and either of you can take it. And just encourage anyone else who has questions for Melanie Goff or Dean Shook to go ahead and put those in the Q&A. The question just disappeared on me. Is the complainant made aware of final outcome or resolution related to a reported incident?
Sure, I can answer that and let Melanie know. Under really all Title IX and EOP procedures, there's a responsibility for the university to communicate equally with both parties. So all of our policies operate under the premise that any information that we get from one party is shared with the other one. So for example, we primarily communicate with letters of final decisions. Those go to both parties. When you get to the live hearings in terms of the Title IX, in those instances that have that live hearings with opportunities for cross-examination, both parties have equal access to all information that be shared at the hearing. As a matter of fact, under our policies, Melanie completed an investigatory report yesterday, which I looked at, and that goes to both parties so that they can comment on that final report. So they're aware of all information at all times. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. While we're waiting for other questions to come in, there was a question about whether or not the slides would be shared. We do plan to share the slides along with a recording of today's presentation, so you'll be able to access all of this later on your own time. Any other questions? While we're waiting, I'm wondering if you could talk about incidents that happen off campus and when your offices would handle those types of incidents. Is it only if it involves university-related activities, or if a student or faculty or staff member is involved in the incident? Sure,
and I can speak to EOP 1.06, which is the Title IX related policy, and that does have jurisdiction over incidents that occur on campus and off campus, and it involves faculty, staff, and students. Both of them, whether it involves faculty and staff, those go to live hearings as well. The only really important notion there is that informal resolution option that we talked about with mediation. We do not use mediation when it involves a student complainant and a faculty or staff respondent because of the power differentials therein.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? You may not be able to answer this now, but when your office changes over, will the reporting mechanism be the same, or are you anticipating some changes there?
The reporting mechanism will look to change. So one of the things that's occurred since last March, those of you who are new may not be aware of this, but last March, the university started with the Title IX task force that led to an implementation group. Part of the work of those two bodies was creating a unified reporting form, and we're already using that. So that is up, and we've received good feedback from it along those lines. So the real changes when the office is structured will really be redoing some of our policy work, the branding of that office and unit. But great, thanks for asking.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions at this time. Is there anything else, Melanie, you want to add, or are we ready to move on?
I can't think of anything at the moment, but of course, if anybody thinks of any other questions, I should be here till the end.
Okay, great. I know Dean Shook has to leave before we get to the end, but Melanie will be here if you have other questions you think of. We will take them at that time. So we'll move on to our second part of today's panel, starting with Shannon Nix, who's the Associate Director of SAVIP in the University Health Services Office. Shannon.
Hi, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Nix, again, Associate Director of SAVIP, which stands for Sexual Assault and Violence Intervention and Prevention. And you can go ahead and move to the next slide. What I want to do today is really to talk about our services in SAVIP. We are the confidential resource here on campus. So it helps if you think of University Health Services as your confidential bubble. I know Dr. Shook already mentioned that. And SAVIP is a department within University Health Services, and it houses both confidential interpersonal violence advocates as well as prevention professionals. So we function a lot like, if you think about in the community, like your rape crisis or domestic violence centers, we really function like that, but here for the U of SC Columbia campus. When I say interpersonal violence for SAVIP purposes, so this is going to look a little different than the policy discussion. Interpersonal violence includes anything on the sexual violence continuum, which is street harassment up. So I have sexual harassment, abuse, and assault. The important thing I think to know for working with us, it doesn't have to have happened while you're a student here. It could be something that happened in childhood or before you came to USC. It doesn't have to be considered law or policy violation. Like there doesn't have to be necessarily a law broken or a policy violated in order to get assistance from us. So anything within that sexual violence continuum, any type of dating relationship, we use the term intimate partner violence. Domestic violence is what's in the Title IX regulations as well as in law. We prefer intimate partner because it is a more inclusive term. This also includes family violence. We do work with students whose family are abusive, and so we can help in those situations as well. And then stalking and harassment. In terms of stalking and harassment, more often than not, statistically, and just what we see here, it is someone you know that is doing the stalking or the harassment, but we can also help if it's someone you don't know or if you're just not sure who's doing that. We do service the entire Columbia campus, which includes undergraduate students, graduate students, staff, and faculty. And we service both primary and secondary survivors. So primary is that person who is directly harmed. Secondary can be a witness, but it can also simply be their support people. So friends, roommates, partners, parents. We can service and talk to those folks. We do talk to a good bit of parents without ever breaking confidentiality. We are at no cost, and we are available 24/7. So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, excuse me, we have our main phone line for SAVIP, which you'll have in just a minute, is a 24/7 access phone line. So if you call it anytime, night or day, weekends, you will get connected with a SAVIP advocate. We have a lot of services. The services really shown on this slide are mainly our advocacy services, but I've bolded prevention and education because I don't want to leave that out. Taylor Simon, that video where Dr. Shook showed the the screenshot of the interpersonal violence website, and there was the video, that was our senior interpersonal violence prevention coordinator, Taylor Simon. She really runs the prevention side of our house. It does programming on bystander intervention, healthy relationships, consent. We do programming on trauma, or if you just want some specific programming on types of interpersonal violence, we can do that as well. But some of the services with advocacy, again, it's confidential. So when you come to us, we are bound by HIPAA. You will sign a privacy rights form and get that copy of that information. You would have to sign a release for us to release any information to anyone outside of SAVIP. Academic assistance is one of our most utilized services for both graduate and undergraduate students. You'll hear from Dale Moore, your ombuds. At the end of the program, we actually work with Dale Moore for the academic assistance piece. You sign a release, we give Dale a call, we don't release any details, and he is able to do that. We are back to hospital accompaniment for forensic exams. The other accompaniment piece I want to stress is we can go with you to just about anything related to that IPV incident as long as it's local. So that would be any meetings or hearings around the judicial system here at USC with Title IX or EOP, student conduct, and also law enforcement and any court proceedings that occur locally. So we've been to bond hearings, restraining order hearings, preliminary hearings, kind of all the way up. So we're pretty full service in terms of our advocacy. And we do refer and connect. We refer everyone to counseling. It's up to you if you want to do that, but we have a lot of resources that we can refer and help out with. Next slide, please. I like for folks to know who you're coming to see. So this is your professional staff. We are hiring for another position, so hopefully in spring we'll have another pro staff, but there's myself. Carol Ann Canty is our lead advocate. So if you're coming in for advocacy, more likely than not, you're going to work with Carol Ann. Taylor Simon, again, is our senior IPV coordinator. We also utilize graduate assistants and interns. Grads don't work with grads in the same program. And if you're like, I don't want to work with a grad assistant, you just let us know and we'll make sure that you work with a professional staff member. Next slide. This is how to find us. We're in the Thompson building on the main campus, which is between the Russell House and the Bull Street Garage. If you're looking at the Center for Health and Wellbeing, it's to the left. You can drop in anytime. We are a crisis center, so you don't have to have an appointment. So anytime we're open, you can just pop in, but then you can call that number after hours or over weekends or even during the day and get access. Next slide. So this is, again, that confidential bubble. I think something got changed. Sorry, I didn't catch something. Counseling and psychiatry should be on there too, but Dr. Caldwell is going to do a deep dive into counseling and psychiatry services for y'all there. So anything in university health. I have healthcare, SAVIP, and counseling are the ones that we usually stress, but also please know there's a whole host of wellness services available: stress management, wellness coaching, sexual health, registered dietitians. All of those folks are confidential and they're all here to help. Next slide. Off campus, Dr. Shook mentioned there's some off campus that we refer to that are still confidential. So this is the hospital that we prefer folks go to if they need or want to do a forensic exam, is Prisma Health Richland, which is the one off of Hardin Street. The specific address is Medical Park Road. This is the one we prefer. So when folks go for a forensic exam, first they have to get medically cleared. So they're going to have to be seen in the emergency room by a physician or a resident to make sure there's no injuries, no broken bones, anything that needs stitches, that kind of stuff. Then they'll call the forensic nurse examiner. At Richland, the FNEs are actually based out of that hospital, and they have their own office in the children's hospital. And so it's in this like nice, quiet, secluded location. It's a nice big room. It's not a cramped ER room. There's like a 24/7 subway. It's just a much nicer, calmer environment to have to do this thing that after you've already been through something really traumatic, and then you have to do something that's really stressful. It's a much better environment for that. That's why we recommend it. Next slide. These are our off-campus resources. I will tell y'all, SAVIP works really closely with all of these folks. They come to campus, they do tabling, we work with them out in the community. So the Hive Community Circle is a lot like SAVIP in that they work with all forms of interpersonal violence, but they really focus on marginalized communities. Sister Care is our local intimate partner domestic violence agency that has a shelter, advocacy, therapy, lots of resources. We work with them when folks need orders of protection. And then Pathways to Healing is formerly Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands. So if anyone's heard of STSM, they have rebranded and now they are Pathways to Healing. And they work also both with primary and secondary survivors of any type of sexual trauma. Next slide. And now it's Rebecca. So I'll jump off.
Thank you so much. So we'll now hear from Dr. Rebecca Caldwell, Associate Vice President for Administration and Wellbeing, who will talk to us about mental health resources, including counseling and psychiatry.
Terrific. Thank you so much for having me. I'm standing in for Dr. E.C. Porter, who is our interim director of counseling and psychiatry. So I want to tell you a little bit about the resources that you can access as grad students. And counseling and psychiatry is a section of University Health Services. So we work hand in hand with Shannon Nix and the other resources that she was talking about. Counseling and psychiatry services are also located in the Thompson building right next door to Russell House. So let me maybe set a little bit of context. We know that mental health concerns amongst all adults, including young people, have been increasing for some time. And so we have been really following that as a campus community. And in 2019, before the pandemic, we already knew that 20% of our students had been diagnosed with depression, and that over 25% of them had been diagnosed with anxiety. When we asked folks this again in spring of 2021, those numbers had increased to 23% had been diagnosed with depression, and almost a third, 33%, had been diagnosed with anxiety. And so we know that the resource needs continue to increase among students. The pandemic itself really just brought so many new types of stressors, the kind of dual pandemics that people are living through. People are living in environments they hadn't planned to live in at that time. Our younger students who you may be teaching spent a lot of the end of high school in their parents' house, as opposed to doing some of the kind of maybe traditional developmental things they might have been doing at that time. And people felt very quickly kind of slammed into that quarantine life, and also are reporting to us a lot that they feel equally as quickly bounced back into fully densified campus life, and that all of those have stressors. And so all of those are kind of a landscape that we're working in right now. In addition, there's really kind of a positive side to the landscape, which is that really in the last kind of 5 to 10 years, mental health concerns have been so kind of massively destigmatized in many sections of American and world culture. And so we find we ourselves as a campus spent a ton of time, in the late teens, really working on, that it's okay to not be okay, and please reach out for resources, and it's okay if you're struggling, this is really normal, so that people would reach out for resources. Our challenge that kind of steps alongside it is the challenge of, as culturally, and I think even sometimes as a campus, we misstepped and have folks really believing that individual counseling is the only way to access mental health resources. And that really creates a real bottleneck at those resources and has people not thinking about the whole spectrum of ways that you can enhance your mental health, the ways that you can deal with mental health concerns. And that's kind of the landscape that we work in right now. So a little bit about counseling and psychiatry. It is kind of a multi-professional, really multi-dimensional organization here on campus. That we have counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, we have social workers, and we we try to address as many folks as we can and try to address their mental health concerns. And so the best way that people kind of enter our services is to come in through our intake process. And so we have this process called intake or initial consultation. We have a team of folks. We have just like increased to up to 6 full-time people right this second for the rest of the year to really help people enter services. And you get a full assessment. You get that person's, undivided attention for a full hour, and you talk about what's bringing you in, what concerns are going on. They know the campus well. So in addition to recommending mental health services that might be a good fit, they can also connect students into resources that they may also need, things like Student Success Center or financial aid or, other kind of things that may help the student address the issue. We'll work with you on kind of some symptom relief, what can help you right now, and make some recommendations to you about what can be a good fit for you to address the concern that brought you in the door. And those recommendations can include things like individual counseling, which we do offer. We offer group counseling, which we can recommend to you, or group counseling is actually something you can sign in without even coming through our intake process. You can sign up for our groups on My Health Space. We may recommend some of our internet-based CBT services. We've got some really terrific services that are designed for people who are associated with colleges that can help you deal with symptoms. That's called TAO, and you don't have to come through intake to access TAO either. We have our own kind of psychiatric services. And for some folks, we may say, hey, we probably think the expertise to deal with the particulars of your issue are in the community, and we can help you get connected there as well. And so that is kind of how people enter services. We know people have, things can be unexpected, right? Things can suddenly become a crisis very quickly, or a condition that you've been managing really well for a while suddenly becomes really overwhelming, or things kind of devolve a little bit. So we do have ways for people to access crisis services as well. Our number, which is the main number for counseling, 777-5223, is answered 24 hours a day. So between 8 and 5, we're answering it here in the Center for Health and Wellbeing buildings. But after 5, it transitions to a crisis service where you can speak to a mental health professional. And so that allows people evenings, weekends, who have immediate needs to speak to someone, to speak to a mental health professional. We also will take crisis walk-ins during the day. So between 8 and 5, you can kind of walk on in if you're thinking, I may I've got an appointment coming up, but this situation just can't wait. This is a crisis for me now. Or I'm just kind of trying to figure out what resources I'm trying to get. I can't seem to figure it out another way. Come on in. That's also a way you can come in. You can also call or come in if you have a pretty intensive concern about a fellow student or a student who might be kind of in your orbit as well. So all of those are ways that people can access our services. Also, some folks may know that they do want to try to connect with a community counselor. We try to serve as many students as we can in any given semester, and so we want to offer lots of access to intake, lots of access to referral. We have actually several case managers who just work on helping respond to BIT reports, helping students who, for instance, may have been hospitalized, and we need to get them connected to all kinds of services. And they also can assist students who are trying to find a local resource, or they've gone home and we need to try to connect them with a resource there. They work on all of those kinds of things. But if you know, for instance, that you really do best like seeing a counselor weekly, or you prefer to see someone off campus, we can help you get connected there. Or from our website, you can go to a link called Thriving Campus. And it is, what it is basically a repository or kind of a search engine of local licensed mental health professionals who really want to work with college students. They've been able to come over to see us and attend a networking lunch where we teach them a little bit about some campus resources. And they're kind of out there saying, I'd love to have some USC students as my clients, and you would utilize, your own health insurance or so forth to see those folks. And so there are ways to connect in with resources. When the pandemic started, we switched all of our services to virtual, and now they are basically a combination. So right now this semester, we offer every service as both virtual or in person, as we kind of try to figure out that right combination of those two services for students. And so grad students will often tell us, I'm interested in services, but I'm worried about running into my undergraduates in a waiting room or things like that, or just life is so busy that just the process of getting over to this part of campus is a lot. And so both our intake appointments and our counseling appointments and about half of our groups are all virtual. So that might be a really good fit as well. We know lots of grad students have the student health insurance plan, which has excellent mental health benefits. And again, we can help you kind of make those connections as well. And so there's lots of different ways for us to help you access services. And we know being a grad student has some really kind of unique challenges. It's an intensive period of time. There's lots of types of dynamics to negotiate. So, we have grad students are equal users of all university health services. We welcome grad students. And so if you're newer to campus, please do know that all of our services are here for you. And Shannon mentioned there's some other types of resources that can be a good fit. We have things like wellness coaching, which is just give you a chance to work one-on-one with someone on stress management, or just working out how to be a grad student and also eat the food that fuels you and move your body in the way that works for you, or get enough sleep. Sleep can sometimes be an issue for grad students. We've got that. We have mindfulness training, yoga classes. Those are all virtual and in person. We also have our resiliency project, which is a project you can sign up for that just allows you to just learn a little bit more about tapping and realizing your resiliency and kind of transferring the resiliency you've developed in your life into kind of new situations. If you're looking for resources just to be more prepared to help your current and future students, we have a couple of different options. We have a great suicide prevention gatekeeper training program. That's like a single multi-hour program. We have mental health first aid, which is a pretty lengthy 8-hour training program that we offer a couple of times a semester. We also have a great certificate program right now through the Center for Teaching Excellence. And so it includes some information about trauma from some experts, including Shannon, includes a workshop on encouraging students' resiliency in the classroom setting, and it includes our mental health, recognizing and responding to mental health concerns presentation. And it's strung together as a certificate that you can graduate with, that then becomes something that is on your CV and so on and so forth. So we kind of work together with CTE to come up with kind of a win-win that both helped you serve students and also kind of served some of academic pursuits if that's important to you as well. So maybe I'll just kind of end right there, and I'm happy to take questions when we get to that section.
Thank you so much, Dr. Caldwell. I think we are ready for questions. If you wouldn't mind just repeating the number that you shared earlier, and I'll put it in the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 803-777-5223. And again, that's counseling's main number, and that's the number when at 501, that's being picked up by our additional mental health service. So that's why that's available 24/7. There's some other great 24/7 resources as well. We just had a great meeting with SC Hopes, which is a statewide mental health resources. They're using federal COVID funds to support folks who are being affected by the pandemic, and they have a crisis line, and I will kind of include that for some follow-up communication. They especially are focused on teachers and healthcare workers who are being disproportionately affected by the pandemic, but their resources are available to any South Carolinian. So that's a great kind of resource, a way to access zero or extremely low cost mental health care as well. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which is that number is actually on the back of the student IDs. If you have one that's been printed in about the last 3 to 4 years, I know some of us have older ones, as well as the crisis text line, which is a great paraprofessional 24-hour resource. So if you're trying to help a student and they have that ambivalence people have about the phone these days, crisis text line might be a really good fit for them as well.
Thank you so much. So we have a few questions. The first one I think could either go to Melanie from the previous part of our panel, or perhaps to Shannon. Unfortunate incidents have occurred with study abroad students. Does the university still have autonomy over those incident investigations when they occur in other countries? Is the university limited in their investigation?
Sure, I'll be happy to answer that. It does kind of depend on exactly what kind of behavior has happened and which policy and really which regulation to fall under, is in Title VI, Title VII, Title IX. And I will say, for the most part, usually, especially if it's a Title IX case, they will. I think as of right now, we are investigating. I think it is by a case-by-case basis. But as of right now, to my knowledge, as long as it is involving a university-affiliated program that they're participating in, then yes, again, if that's Title IX, then it should be investigated as of right now under our policies, yes.
And I just wanted to chime in and say SaveUp can support no matter if it's investigated, through the school or not. Or even, I meant to say, if the person who's done the harm, they don't have to be affiliated with the school in order for us to provide support.
Thank you. The next question, are community-based services free of charge for students with referrals but no additional insurance?
The ones that I listed, all the nonprofits, yes, those are at no cost. So I know like Pathways to Healing is pretty much, they offer 6 months of counseling kind of right out, and then they can extend that as needed. But the nonprofits don't typically have any charge for services. That is how they function. Counseling and psychiatry, Rebecca can answer more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of a couple of community low-cost options. I think, honestly, that SC Hopes hotline is a great way to connect in. So Columbia Area Mental Health, together with that COVID funding source, can allow people to get no or very low cost per session. They said when they see people charged, might be like $5 or $7 a session. Another fantastic resource that I didn't talk about, but when we think about kind of non-counseling and psychiatry but low cost, is the Psychological Services Center out of the psychology department. So they've got a terrific clinic of trainees and have a very, very low kind of copay. They have tons of expertise around like living with ADHD in college, things like that. And so that's a terrific resource if CAP isn't the fit, but you're looking for kind of lower, no cost.
Great, thank you. The next question, with the pandemic and the rising numbers of anxiety and depression, I love that there is the CALM, C-A-L-M facility in the Student Health Center. Is there a plan to expand a program like that for different buildings across campus? There really is not anything near Darla Moore or Public Health.
Yeah, that's a great question. We love that space too, and everything we do in there, we do live broadcasts since the pandemic started. And so I think when facilities are being planned or kind of being owned by like a college or so forth, that's a good place for it's really. It becomes a collaboration with the space itself. We've engaged in a few planning meetings about some of the new campus buildings, the residence hall buildings, and we're going to kind of do a space there as well. So we'd be happy to partner with those buildings if they have kind of space they're interested in converting and doing some program planning and so forth. So happy to be a part of those conversations. I don't think we're in any, given the university's space constraints, so we're not in any other active conversations right now.
So there was a certificate program mentioned for mental health through CTE for faculty. Is there anything similar for staff?
We've had some staff come through that certificate program. So CTE is extremely friendly to staff members. I think they're very much in the philosophy that we're all educators. And so I think that staff would be welcomed there. We've developed kind of a counterpart for students to help them kind of develop a series of things that gives them kind of students really like, kind of having a title or a label to indicate their concern and expertise and so forth. So we haven't developed a staff specific one. We do lots and lots of programming through the Office of Professional Development with Human Resources. So entire resiliency project, our faculty staff mindfulness series, all of those types of things trainings often are also promoted, and we do special versions through the Office of Professional Development. So that can be a really good fit as well.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in and say we do How to Support a Survivor through the Office of Professional Development. So I do that twice a semester. So if you're teaching, or I mean, it's for anybody who's gone through tough times, but we kind of make it more interpersonal violence. Dr. Wright, Rebecca mentioned the trauma piece in the CTE program. Dr. Sarah Wright, who is a licensed psychologist in our counseling and psychiatry services, she and I co-facilitate a three-series workshop on trauma called Trauma 101. We may rename it, so just be aware. But we do it twice a semester, and it's 6 hours total. So it's 2 hours per, but we do one during the day and then one in the evening. And all you have to do is email me, and I can put my email in the chat or Tracy, if you want to do that, that's fine. If y'all have any interest in that program.
Sure, I can put it there right now if you want to give it to me. Okay, I thought you were going to tell me.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I got it. It's Nix, NIXS2.
NIX?
Yes, S as in Sally, 2 at mailbox.
Okay. All right. I don't see any other published questions. Shannon, you mentioned that your office takes walk-ins. I know there's sometimes a wait to get help with counseling and psychiatry. Are you having any issues with wait time or?
We don't. We have enough folks here, and just with the drop in traffic that we get, we're able to accommodate. So there's no issues with wait time. Okay. With SAVEP.
Great. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, we will move on, I think, to our next section of panelists. Sorry, there's one more. Let me pull that one. What resources are available to students who are suffering from verbal harassment when it doesn't fall in the category of the groups protected by law, or it's hard to prove? That might be a question from Melanie. Shannon, did you have something to add there?
I was going to say and that could be case by case, because we would have to, look at the specifics of what's happening. When we talk about reporting options, because that's part of our job as advocates, to be like, it's your right to know what your options are. If the person who did the harm is affiliated with USC, we always talk about USC options, but law enforcement is always an option. So with harassment, verbal could be a little bit trickier, but particularly a lot of harassment, what we see is technological. And so we would just talk through, talk us through the situation, and let's then kind of look at what our options are. And I'll let Melanie chime in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree absolutely with what Shannon said. And yeah, as far as what we could do, I mean, really with EOP, what we would do is mainly investigation. So we would assess it. Does it look like it would be something that would fall under one of our policies that would rise to the level of an EOP violation? So we would always assess it. And then if it's not something that we, would actually investigate, or that doesn't fall under one of our policies, we can always refer to another resource, whether it's on or off campus. And like Shannon said, of course, they're very happy to help with anything that they can, as far as being a resource in that way. So yeah, absolutely. They can always report it to us, and we can find out whether or not it's something that we can actually take a look at. And if not, we'll make sure that we get them connected with somebody who can.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so our next presenter is Julian Williams, who's the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Dean Weldon. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to get a chance to talk to all of the participants here, tell you a little bit about the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. As I work my way through the program, obviously I will stick around for questions, but if there's something that anybody wants to reach out to me offline, they can reach out directly. They can stop by my office. Our offices for ODEI is located in the second floor of the Thornwell Annex, and then we also have an office suite on the second floor of the Sumwalt building. So a little bit about who we are. We are the office here at the University of South Carolina that is really working, really proactively to try to make us more equitable, try to make us more inclusive, and try to create a learning environment where all people, regardless of background, can live, work, and thrive. And I always try to center myself around the why and the why that's important. So as we think about our mission as a public flagship university, we should be reflective of what our community looks like. We should be reflective of our vision and our values as a university. And what we know is that there are sources of strength for us in that space, but there are also areas where this university has fallen short in terms of sustaining the type of environment that supports all members of its community, the type of environment which invites all members of the community to show up sort of authentically every day. And these are some of the things that my office is working towards. And the way we do that is through partnership, through ongoing initiatives, through working with some of the partners, campus helpers that you've already heard from, whether they be in student affairs, on our faculty, those in academic administration, and others as well. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of ways where you may get involved as a graduate student in some of the things that my office will be undergoing over the next few years. And then also to say that, one of the strongest, I think, areas of partnership for us, at least for me, when I arrived at the university in June of 2020, was with our Graduate Student Association, who, in my opinion, is very attuned to these issues around equity and inclusion. I just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the executive team there. So I always look forward to working with that group, and would encourage our graduate students to really connect with their student government leadership in this space as well. This is my awesome team who I get the pleasure to work with every day. We are a small but growing team. The Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is really almost only not even 18 months old yet. So we're growing and building, but these are the folks that I get a chance to work with. So for purposes of this group, I would encourage folks that are thinking about how they might get connected to reach out to a couple of people. Obviously, you can reach out directly to me, but also to our Director of Diversity Education and Inclusive Excellence, Dr. Karen Kassabaum, who's going to be leading our Inclusive Excellence and Diversity Education efforts, primarily for our faculty and our staff, and really around creating capacity for how we can live, work, and learn. How do we create inclusive classrooms and inclusive learning environments, and what does that look like from an ongoing professional development standpoint? And then we're also really excited to add Dr. Michelle Bryan as our Associate Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. She's going to be joining us officially in July of next year, but she is currently serving as the Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in our College of Education. So we're really excited about the team, the direction that we're going, and also how we're going to support our students, faculty, and staff moving forward. So if you wouldn't mind moving the slides forward one, I'll just go over a few things. So how can you get involved? I have a couple of things here on the slides, but also as I was thinking, a couple of things that I left off just by virtue of getting prepared. But I would also encourage our graduate students to get to know the Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion in your academic unit. Each one of our academic units has an Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion. And each one of those folks is primarily connected to the infrastructure relating to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how that unit is focused on moving forward in those areas. So each of those folks creates a council of academic diversity officers, but I would really recommend our graduate students to get to know the folks in their own academic unit. One, they're there to support you, but also they are, if you are looking to try to do more for your college or unit, that person is going to be an excellent person to connect with. If you're looking to connect with me in any way, shape, or form, you can reach out to me directly, but I also hold monthly office hours in the Intersection Lounge at the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs, or OMSA. Intersection Lounge is located in Russell House, so you can also stop and see me, and we can talk then as well. And then one of the things that definitely affects our graduate students and came about by virtue of advocacy from our graduate students, as well as others, as well as Faculty Senate, the graduate school as well, but is our preferred name and pronoun implementation. So we now have the ability, or members of the USC community have the ability to go on mysc.edu and submit their preferred name and their preferred pronoun. You can also change your email display name to that effect as well. This is optional, so if you don't want to do it, you don't have to, but if you do want to, what we are now working on is making sure that those preferred name and pronoun roll into other systems at the university. So Blackboard is top of the list, Carolina Card over time as well. So what we are endeavoring to do as we think about our mission to create an equitable and inclusive space is make sure those that have a preferred name or preferred pronoun, that they can self-submit that name and have that information be a part of their class roster, be a part of some of the internal information and databases here at the university as well. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. A couple of other areas where you can get involved. One, as I think about our obligation as a flagship university to solve big problems, for me, it's how do we empower our faculty, and by virtue of that, our graduate students who work really closely with our faculty to help solve big problems. And I think one of the biggest problems and biggest issues facing society, but also facing South Carolina, is systemic racism, is systemic injustice. And how do we work as a university, particularly a public research university, to be out in the community, out in the greater world to help solve those problems. So one of the ways that we're endeavoring to do that as a university is through our Racial Justice and Equity Research Fund, which is a partnership initiative between my office and our Vice President for Research's office. So last year we provided over $200,000 in internal research funding to University of South Carolina faculty. And these are faculty who are working on projects and centering, and through their research is centering racial justice and equity. So some of you all may be working closely with faculty that received one of these grants, or some of you may be working closely with faculty that just put in a request for proposal for the round 2 of the funding. So we're really excited about how that initiative is continuing. In year 1, like I said, we gave out a little over $200,000. This year, our Vice President for Research has agreed to increase that funding threshold up to $350,000. Unfortunately, the call for proposals is over at the moment, but what I'm hoping that we will continue to do is to support that as a university. So as you all are thinking about your research areas, are thinking about how you're partnering with faculty, you know, and this can be across the board interdisciplinarily. Really, if you're working on research that is centering race and racial justice and racial equity, really think about this source of internal funding as you're looking to get that research moving forward. And on the other side, as you all are thinking about programming, academic or multicultural initiatives or partnerships, workshops, and may need some funding support, we can provide that funding support through my office. So we're offering diversity and inclusive excellence mini grants up to $2,000 for programs, events, workshops. It's open to all students, student registered clubs and organizations, and faculty and staff. So you have to be connected to an office or unit or student organization. But if you are, and you think you might want to put on a program or come up with an ongoing initiative, definitely feel free to reach out to us. The application for those funds is available on our website here at the university. And if there's questions, you can always reach out to me. But we just launched that a few months ago. We've given out probably about $10,000, maybe $10,000 to $15,000 in funding for a multitude of of different programs. But I'm really excited about what that's going to turn into over time as our students, faculty, and staff really take it upon themselves to try to create the type of environment which we all want here at the university as well. The other piece here that I would encourage you all to seek more information about and just keep an eye out for is that we're working on right now is what we've sort of entitled right now the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summer Fellowship. So what we will be endeavoring to do is this upcoming summer is to hire an undergraduate student as well as a graduate student to work, and there will be a stipend attached with that, a competitive stipend, but essentially work closely with our office, be a member of our team, support some of those team members that you got a chance to see in terms of their ongoing work and ongoing initiatives. And also, this may be a chance for particularly our graduate students to bring in some of their research areas into our work as well. Not on the slide, but we're also working right now to hire a couple graduate assistants to work closely with Drs. Kassabaum and Dr. Bryan as well. And I think they're looking at a couple of HESA students actually right now. So we really think it's important that our office is connected to our graduate student population and also our undergraduate student population as well. So we've got a couple of undergraduate student workers that work really closely with us. So if you're looking to get connected, definitely just reach out to me. Or if you'd like to keep up with what we're doing, you can follow us on social media, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, or you can follow us on our office's website, where we try to keep the community up to date on what's going on from a programming perspective, as well as from an initiative perspective as well. So Dean Weldon, that was all that I had. I will stay on and look forward to any questions.
Thank you so much, VP Williams. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Toby Jenkins, who's the Interim Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Graduate School, and also a member of the Council of Academic Diversity Officers that was just mentioned. Dean Jenkins.
Good morning, and thank you, Dean Weldon, for organizing this informative session. I've actually learned a lot. I found it very, very helpful. I want to focus my time on answering 3 critical questions about academic diversity officers. So first, who are we? How do we serve you? And how do you find us? That will kind of frame out what we talk about today. So first, who are we? The academic diversity officers are most often faculty members that have been identified as particularly dedicated to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that might be or some of the programs and initiatives that they have created on campus before even having a position or title. But they've typically demonstrated a commitment to DEI in some way, and they are appointed either full-time or part-time to lead DEI efforts in a school or college at the university. Right? So the academic diversity officers are concentrated in your particular colleges. And then someone like me, I'm serving in the graduate school, but we're concentrated in the schools and colleges, as opposed to the broader university-wide DEI work that Vice President Williams' office stewards and leads. Now let's look at how do we serve you. So first, we can be one of the first people you contact or connect with to build community, to build a community of support on campus. So beyond the faculty members in your program, it's always good to have an advocate outside of your program, 1 or 2 people that you know within your broader college. They might not even be in your department, but they can be advocates and forms of support, community members who are just in your college. Or they might be 1 or 2 people that you know across campus, right? So your community can be larger than the college where your academic program is housed. But the diversity officer in your college and in the grad school, like me, can be one of those people for you, right? So one of those advocates, either in your broader college or across campus. We aren't just a person to contact with a problem. We're a person to build a proactive relationship with, because we can help to connect you to other people, to opportunities that we might be aware of on campus, to assistance and resources, et cetera. Right. So feel free to contact us just to meet us, just to know someone on campus. You don't have to have a reason to give us a call or to shoot us an email and ask for a meeting or to grab coffee or lunch or anything with your academic diversity officer. We also create programs, initiatives, events, and interventions that help build an inclusive campus. So, for example, the College of Arts and Sciences just recently hosted an Equity and Inclusion Summit. the College of Education also hosted an educational inquiry for equity and justice symposium, right? So these are things that are happening within the colleges and that are often supported by the academic diversity officer or the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in that particular college, right? So events that are coming out, they're often available for the entire campus to attend, but they are most definitely things that are provided in service to your particular college and to all of the students in your college. In the graduate school, as Interim Associate Dean of DEI, I am developing a portfolio of programs aimed at graduate students and graduate faculty broadly, right? So these are kind of cutting across, they're cross-disciplinary, they're looking at broad DEI issues that might be of interest to graduate students and graduate faculty across all of the colleges, right? So some of these programs, and many of you have seen them coming out of the DEI updates that I've been sending out, but the upcoming faculty lounge at U of SC, right? So this is a virtual podcast and webinar series that we'll have the first one for this semester on this coming Monday, November 15th at 1 p.m. That's an opportunity for particularly graduate students and the graduate community here to engage with national scholars on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education. This upcoming faculty lounge will focus on humanizing scholarly resistance. So we'll particularly look at the attacks on scholar activists and how to navigate that through building community and partnership and helping each other as dedicated scholars and researchers doing the work that is focused on of issues of equity and inclusion. So that is something that will happen in the fall and spring. We also recently launched the Grad Cohort podcast series. So this is a podcast series that is for grad students and by grad students. It's a partnership with the Center for Innovation in Higher Education, which identifies a graduate course each semester that will take on a particular topic of DEI based on their discipline. And as a final project in the course, the graduate students in that course host a podcast and will record podcast episodes. And then we publish those episodes as a launch. So that launched in September, and the current series will remain up and available on the website, on the Center for Innovation in Higher Education's website for everyone to access. So we encourage you all to access that. We are also developing an inclusive leadership symposium. So looking at not necessarily DEI issues or research issues or scholarship issues in your particular disciplines, but looking at the idea of what does it mean to be an inclusive leader, regardless of your discipline. And so in the spring, we'll be hosting a leadership symposium that's just tackling the issue of building your capacity to lead in your particular field, to think broadly and deeply about DEI issues, to advance those issues, and to take on leadership capacity, whether that's as a supervisor or to build your leadership capacity as a supervisor, as a mentor, as an administrator, whatever role, but really thinking about how do we build leadership capacity regardless of discipline, but when it comes to issues of inclusivity. So that will be actually a face-to-face leadership symposium that we host in the spring semester. We're also starting an initiative called DEI Talks for grad faculty. We recognize that building faculty capacity to understand and address DEI issues is an important aspect of impacting the student experience. Right. So the retention of our students really does depend on the capacity of our faculty and staff to understand these issues. So the DEI talks are primarily aimed at or directed at faculty and instructors, but particularly to just kind of get us to complicate and our understanding of things like graduate admissions. And what does inclusive or holistic admissions look like, and why is it valuable, and why should we think about changing or transforming the ways that we approach things that we've always done, policies, procedures, et cetera. Right, so that will launch in the spring semester. We're also providing more concentrated support for our scholarly fellow communities. So the graduate school provides several different scholarship initiatives, fellowship initiatives for graduate students, the Grace Jordan McFadden Professors Program, the Presidential Fellows, the SREB Fellows, we have Bridge to Doctorate programs, we have lots of different scholarly initiatives. And so we'll be doing more to work with those initiatives, to bring those communities of fellows together, and to get them engaged in some of the new programs and trainings that we're providing, both broadly with the professional development that the graduate school already provides, and also the new diversity programs and initiatives that we're creating. We're also doing more concentrated work around diversity recruitment. So we just welcomed Keisha Clavin to our team, who is the senior diversity recruiter for the graduate school. From that, we will be building not just more traditional recruiting efforts, but also some more pipeline and educative recruiting efforts, engagement with even our undergraduate community here at University of South Carolina, but also HBCU outreach throughout South Carolina, et cetera. So more to come on that, but we're really focusing on graduate recruitment. And we're also meeting with graduate students. Both the dean and I meet with the Graduate Student Association to liaison with those students in a variety of different ways. My meetings focus kind of specifically on DEI-related issues and policies that grad students have identified as priorities. I'll actually be attending their executive council meeting this afternoon. So, we're in kind of regular contact with GSA. We also which are meetings with students outside of GSA. So we want to make sure that we're also providing access and space for students who might not participate in GSA to also have opportunities to speak directly with the graduate school and kind of bring their experiences to us. So those campus conversations are particularly with the leaders of affinity groups, graduate affinity groups that have been developed over the last couple of years. So those are some of the things that are happening in the grad school. But academic diversity officers are also working to address kind of policy-related issues that impact how students navigate their educational experience in each of your schools and colleges. So this might mean advancing conversations and actions related to, like I said, admissions decision-making, hiring practices for faculty and staff, inclusive teaching practices, and resources and services that are provided to students, right? So ensuring that when we talk about resources allocation, we're addressing the diverse and varied needs of a wide variety of students, that all students' needs are kind of brought to the table. And so that's why we do the outreach with the student organizations, with the students. That's why I'm providing some of the broader programs and initiatives for graduate faculty, but the academic diversity officers within your colleges are working really diligently with the faculty and administrators in your colleges to advance these issues within the programs and departments within each college. And then, of course, just as everyone else here on this panel today, we are also a resource when you have an issue or face a problem. So whenever you're having an issue, whether it's an academic problem, your grades might be suffering, issues that might have with faculty members, financial problems, problems at home, personal issues, don't go at it alone. And I think that's a common thread that we probably all share with you. Don't ignore the issue hoping that it will go away. Talk to someone. Often students may not have a faculty member, depending on what year you are in your program, you may not have a relationship with a faculty member just yet that you feel kind of comfortable enough or close enough to share problems that you're having with another faculty member or personal issues that you might be having at home. And while you might not even know your diversity officer, this is a neutral person who can serve as an initial point of contact to help you get to the right person to help you, right? So, and that might be us getting you to Dale Moore, who's coming next, who serves as your ombudsman. This might mean us connecting you to some of the other services that were just shared earlier, right? Us being kind of aware of who these people are and where they reside on campus and how they might be able to help you. But the diversity officer can be your initial point of contact to get you to the right service. But again, I stress that you don't have to experience a problem to reach out to us. You can just contact us just to meet or to chat and talk or just to build community. But we are here for whatever need you might have. And so I think the last question is, how do you find us? So the Council of Academic Diversity Officers, their information is listed on the University DEI website. This is the website of Vice President Williams' office, right? So you kind of talked about that. There, in title, it's called, the short name for it is CADO, but the entire list of CADO officers, Council of Academic Diversity Officers, the entire list of CADO officers is on that website and with email addresses and everything. So to find who your academic diversity officer in your college, you'd go to Vice President Williams' the office, their website, and that list is there. They should also be listed under the leadership on the web page of your specific college. Where the dean's office or the leadership on the web page of your college should probably be listed there. And more information on DEI in the graduate school can be found on the graduate school's webpage. I send out 1 to 2 DEI updates each month to all grad students, grad program directors, and faculty on the graduate school's graduate council. So these updates kind of share our upcoming programs and events. They highlight programs and events that are happening across campus. And I also share some free virtual events happening nationally that might be of interest. My email address is jenki279, JENKI279 @mailbox.sc.edu. And I'll turn it over to Dean Weldon to move into the next panelist and the next section.
Thank you so much, Dean Jenkins. Please keep your questions coming. We will get to them very shortly. We have one more presentation by Dale Moore, who is Assistant Dean and Graduate Ombuds.
Thank you, Dean Weldon, and thanks to all of the panelists for sharing your valuable information, and thanks to those who are joining us online. We appreciate your interest and your investment in Friday morning to become better informed, which brings me to my role. My role as Ombuds is to be an independent resource and also to be neutral, impartial, or unaligned, and to be confidential. My role is to help you solve your problems. And sometimes it's much easier to be proactive and address issues on the front end rather than try and address those problems on the back end. So as far as my role as Ombuds is concerned, it can be in your best interest in many ways to use information that includes policy and procedure that help you rather than be somehow perceived as punitive, because we sort of live in a world where No one wants to assume personal responsibility for problems, but at the same time, this is a shared responsibility. We don't expect students to memorize the Graduate Studies Bulletin chapter and verse, but we do expect them to be familiar with policy and procedures that affect them. And so many of the problems that come my way are either problems that are associated with a lack of information or misunderstanding of information, or it's often framed by students who come to me with problems as nobody told me. And with that said, it's my job to help them understand how policy and procedure can be a friend or an asset rather than sort of be framed as the enemy and something that keeps them from doing what they want or what they need. So with that said, I think it's important to understand that because I am neutral and impartial and unaligned, it means that I cannot be a student advocate. I think often students come to me with problems who perceive or in some ways expect that my role is to be their advocate. Now granted, certainly the Office of the Ombuds can be an advocate for a fair process, but that doesn't mean that I'm in a position to choose sides and to offer information that can help you solve a problem from a perspective of advocacy. You know, a lot of the information that has been shared this morning does provide opportunities for graduate student advocacy, and that's an important role. But generally speaking, my role, while it might be framed as one who ensures a fair process, and in that respect advocating for fairness, it is not one that provides advocacy per se. Unfortunately, so often students who come to my office need advocacy more than they need an ombuds. With that said, I hope I can provide information that helps them solve their problems. When I think about the importance of my role, so often students are disappointed that I can't solve their problem for them. It's not like I have some magic wand in my desk that I pull out and wave and solve their problems. And I think that is a disconnect between expectation and reality. It is my role to help them solve problems informally if possible. Often students come to my office seeking assistance after they've already begun a formal process, which may complicate what I can do to help them. But it doesn't mean that I have no role, and it doesn't mean that I can't offer assistance, particularly as it relates to information that can help them perhaps frame their problem differently, provide policy and procedure to bear that can help them not only understand, but take advantage of policy and procedure that can help them. So when I think about the opportunity to solve problems informally, generally that's a function of how early in the process that solution is sought by students who have issues or problems that they struggle to solve on their own. I think often students who have problems seek a confidential source that can help, or resource perhaps, that can help them gain some perspective that maybe they don't have and perspective that maybe they need. I think it's within my role and my power to provide that perspective. It is often the case that students are quick to rely upon information that they have gleaned from any number of resources, not the least of which may be departmental staff or perhaps an advisor or someone else who may not understand the depth and breadth of policy and procedure that could be brought to bear in a given situation that can help students solve their problems informally. With that said, I often refer students to other resources that may not be informal, but if there is very little I can do to offer assistance in helping students solve problems informally, I think it is my responsibility to help them understand more formal resources that can be their friend, can be used to advocate for a fair process and help them understand how they might solve their problems through resources that might include disability services, or the Student Disability Resource Center, or EOP that we've heard from already, Title IX that we've heard from, counseling that we've heard from. All of these are internal resources that are readily available. There are other external resources that may not be so readily available, or students may not be as familiar with. Perhaps those problems are such that discussions about external resources may be appropriate. Well, it might be that in the context of resources that can help, I might refer students to external resources that could include the Department of Education, the OCR division of the Department of Education. I might even refer to their right to seek legal counsel or to discuss their concerns with an attorney. All of those things are part of the portfolio that might come into the conversation depending upon the nature of the problem. At the end of the day, my help is in many ways confined to taking advantage of opportunities to help students solve their problems, if informally, if possible. That's not always possible. And in some cases, it may be that my role is to help them understand how accessing certain policy and procedure can help them resolve their issue or find a desired outcome through a formal process. Well, it's important for students to understand that perhaps first and foremost, my role is to be a resource that is objective and aligned and confidential. And I might mention that there is perhaps one exception to that rule. Even though I'm not a reporting office, it is my responsibility to let students know at the top of the conversation that there is a major exception to the confidentiality of my role. If they represent, based upon what they tell me, and again, I make this clear at the top of the conversation, if they represent a threat to themselves or to other people, then while I may not be a reporting office, it is my responsibility to serve notice that they should seek the appropriate resources that can help them solve their problems. And sometimes I simply am not that person. Often my referrals are unique to their circumstance. Doesn't mean they're unique to student problems in general, but it certainly means that my role is to help them whether or not my services can help them solve those problems or not. Well, many students reach out to me either by phone, sometimes they reach out by email, and I just want students to know that it's better, depending upon how sensitive their questions are or their issues might be, that it may be better to reach out by phone. I'm happy to share my direct line. It's 803-777-8237. That is readily available on our website. My email address, if it is just maybe to reach out and let me know that they would like to meet or meet face-to-face or have a phone call or a conversation, certainly you can reach me by email in that respect, but I urge you not to share sensitive or confidential information via email. My email address is dm@mailbox.sc.edu. Even during the pandemic, as long as the offices were open, students who needed to meet face-to-face, I was certainly able to accommodate them. And sometimes students need, for whatever reason, that face-to-face contact, and I'm happy to provide that option whenever possible. I don't really have much more to add here, but I do want to emphasize that my role is to provide information, and that information, I hope, can promote better decisions. A more informed decision is usually a better decision. And as students often know, perhaps with the benefit of hindsight, choices have consequences, and sometimes they make poor choices that are difficult to overcome. But I have resources at my disposal that I readily share with students to help them solve those problems so that we can sometimes contain the damage, or we can use extenuating circumstances that might help them solve that problem, even retroactively. And that is very much a part of the role of the ombuds. Again, I emphasize this is a shared responsibility, and it doesn't mean that the student shares no responsibility in being informed and being proactive. Policy and procedure can be their friend rather than their enemy, and I urge you to make it your responsibility to be as informed as you possibly can. Happy to take questions, and again, I urge you to reach out either by email, which again, I caution you, don't share confidential or sensitive information, but I'm happy to respond to email requests, call you directly. You have my direct line, 777-8237, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Dean Moore, and thank you to all of our panelists. We have about 20 minutes, I think, to take your questions. Please continue to send those in. The first question, I think perhaps Dr. Caldwell, if you're still here, you might be able to address. The question is, what are the support services that TAs would receive if they get COVID?
Hey, absolutely. I'm happy to help out. So if TAs get COVID, or when any student gets COVID, we kind of support people a couple of ways. Whether you let us know that you have COVID, or whether you come through a campus testing option, kind of one of your first opportunities is to speak with our contact tracers, who will go ahead and talk with you more about where your risk is, who are some folks who might be also possibly at risk for COVID based on that, based on your case, and then just kind of walking you through the details of how you experience an isolation incident, you know, how you access healthcare, how you're going to access food, do you need any additional resources, and so on and so forth. So that is how we do, you know, support students. You know, as a TA, you would be the one who, we don't necessarily share your information. You're the one who's going to be responsible to work together with your department to get things like your classes covered, and to work your way through how that your illness and or your isolation, because it's sometimes just an isolation of you feeling pretty decently, will be accommodated so you can kind of continue your role.
Thank you. I think the next question goes to VP Williams. Would you please repeat one more time the information about your open office hours in the Russell House?
Sure. Yep, happy to, Dean Weldon. So we're doing the monthly. So next month I'll be there from 3:30 to 5 on December 8th, January 12th, 3:30 to 5. If anyone can't make that, you can always just reach out to me directly. My email is julian.williams@sc.edu, or if you follow us on social media, you can just keep updates, and the information will be posted there about when the AMSA office hours are.
And remind us again where that office is in the Russell House.
Yeah, it's the Intersection Lounge in the Russell House, so it's on the, I think, west side of the Russell House.
And the next question, I think, also perhaps goes to you. I just lost it, sorry. The graduate school sometimes gets questions from students related to preferred names. You mentioned earlier the progress that we've made in that regard, specifically about preferred names on U of SC diplomas. In reference to a student's preferred name or pronoun, are diplomas included, or do diploma name changes still require a legal name change through the Office of the Registrar?
Yes, that's a great question, Dean Weldon, and for the person that asked it. And they are correct. Because the diploma is considered a legal document, the preferred name and pronoun implementation wouldn't apply to that. So I would encourage anyone that has questions to reach out to Caroline Wallace, who's the LGBTQ Q+ coordinator within the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. But unfortunately, to change the name on a university diploma, the student would have to go through the legal name change process, which we know can take time and can be somewhat arduous. But the good part is that Caroline does have some information about how a student might engage with that process. I've had this conversation with our registrar a couple of times, and because the diploma is considered a legal document, the same way a driver's license would be as well, it would have to go through a legal name change process.
Thank you. The next question I think could go to you or maybe to Dean Jenkins. The work being done by DEI is so very important. Are there specific performance measurements in place that ensure policies are effective?
Dean Jenkins, did you want to take a first stab at that, or I'm happy to jump in as well.
Well, I can speak briefly and then hand it over to you, which was what my plan was going to be, because I think it makes sense. We're following, of course, your lead from the university perspective as far as strategic planning and metrics, et cetera. So, but, I think broadly, as individuals within various colleges and schools create smaller, more individual initiatives, we're probably being guided in two ways. So one are by the kind of national standards that have been set forth by organizations like the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, and the types of standards and metrics that have been made available widely to people doing this work, as far as to guide us in thinking about how do you measure, what are you measuring, and things of that nature. Then the other piece is us being guided specifically by our university's strategic plans and the metrics that are set forth with regards to evaluating our performance and everything, right? So we're evaluating the effectiveness of the programs and events, assessing how valuable students found them, student participation or broad participation. But then we're also looking at more, policy related issues and changes and in ways that we're seeing things transform, grow, et cetera. And that's really, as the strategic plan unfolds and as we all build and dig deeper into this work, because a lot of these things have been positions like mine just created, right? So as we build new initiatives, then we're tapping into to ensuring that we're measuring those initiatives based on the strategic plan and the university strategic plan and the metrics that have been set forth by Vice President Williams' office. So I'll hand over to you to kind of talk about that.
Thanks so much. And I think you're exactly right. The only thing I'll add is the university strategic plan, particularly Priority 4, does set out a number of specific metrics around diversity, equity, and inclusion, which are all of our academic unit as well as our administrative units are expected to work to achieve. Now we know that that is going to take time, and it definitely will require a good deal of accountability across the board from all of us, as well as a proactive look at our policies in relation to how they are helping us or harming us in terms of meeting those metrics. So I would encourage those that are curious to take a look at the strategic plan Priority 4. The metrics relate to our student and faculty recruitment, numbers and effectiveness around programming, student success, and a number of and as well as faculty recruitment and retention as well. So I would encourage others to take a look at those as well if they're curious, or we can have a conversation offline as well.
Wonderful, thank you. While we're waiting to see if there are any other questions, I wonder, VP Williams, if you could talk about the bias and hate incident report, reports that are submitted. What role, if any, does your office play in vetting those reports?
Sure, Dan, that's great. So there is a process that would allow individuals to file complaints for incidents of bias and hate incidents. The role that my office plays is particularly as a conduit to the necessary offices that would be responsible for investigating those complaints. So it may be student conduct, it could be EOP, which we've heard from, could be university police as well. So, you know, what we would then do with those, because they would come to us as well as a number of other individuals on campus, is make sure and ensure that there is some sort of follow-up from those investigatory offices to the individual that submitted the complaint.
And just in terms of the appropriate order, at what point would a Cato officer be consulted, or perhaps the graduate ombuds? Would that be before the incident report is submitted, or after?
It would typically be after, Dean Weldon, because it may require, and it depends on what happens with any potential investigation. It may be that the potential follow-up for the incident, let's say it doesn't lead to a formal investigation from conduct or EOP, the follow-up could be with the unit level diversity officer, not for discipline, but for, you know, for informational purposes and possibly to support that student moving forward. It could be with HR as well, or we could be referring the student to the graduate ombuds to make sure that they are aware, as Dr. Moore mentioned, aware of the resources and processes that might be available to them as well.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other questions coming through. Is there anything else that any of the panelists would like to say as sort of closing remarks, final words, anything you wanted to share and didn't get an opportunity to? If not, I will thank you all for your participation today. Thanks so much to the panelists for the information. I hope that those who are in attendance found it helpful, and we will post the slide deck as well as the recording of today's presentation so that you can review it on your own time. We'll also have a list of the resources, contact information that were shared today, and make sure that you have easy access to that. Later today, you will receive an email asking you to fill out a brief survey. It will give you an opportunity to give us some feedback on today's presentation, and also to let us know what other types of presentations you might find helpful. So I will ask if you would please just take a few minutes to complete that survey to give us that feedback. It would be tremendously helpful. And if there aren't any other questions, I will thank you all and wish you a happy Friday and a good weekend. Thank you.